Well, hello, everybody. Hmm. Did everybody have a good holiday?
Yes, yes, it was good.
Good. Y'all not still on vacation, are you?
I am. I'm on vacation.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see everybody. Well, I see it's 7 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Let me continue to admit people while I share my screen. Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. All right. So we're at Zoom class 4. We have one more to go. Tonight we have John, Quintina, Donovan, and Monique, unless
And
we
me.
had any
And
change.
me.
And Brittany, that is correct.
And I'm going in Donovan's spot, and he's going to go in mine on the
All
28th.
right, that sounds good to me. All right, a quick update on our stars of the week. For the EDP, the folks out in front are Danielle and Brittany, and our points leaders are Regina, Camille, Naisha, Brittany, Yesenia, and Danielle. So we're doing really well. We have one, two, three, four, five, six stars of the night, so that's good. Y'all just had a better instructor. Just think what you'd be doing. All right, without any further ado, John, are you ready to go? I'll stop my share. Make sure everybody's in the waiting room is in. I'll turn off my video. There comes one more. And there's Kanisha. Keep on that. Keep. There she is.
Will they work on my phone?
There you
My
are.
phone? They're gonna connect to my phone. So probably my
So I met with, while
oh,
we're waiting on John here, I
well,
met with Sine and Kenesha this week on dissertation. They've got a good grip on what's going on. If either one of them wants to say anything unkind about me, they can share that later. But I encourage you to sign up, and if you can't find a sign up, if you want to meet, let me know about 24 hours in advance, and I'll find you a time. I've met with Brittany as well. We need to be. I'd like for you to have. Now I know this is, but I'd like for you to have a good, solid, at least outline of your first 3 chapters going into your research semester. It'll make so much more sense once you get through that, or and well, what they're doing will make sense if you've kind of got an outline as to where it fits in what you're doing. We need to kind of be finalizing your thoughts and ideas and getting a good outline down on paper. I met with Yesenia as well. So I think I met with 4 of y'all this week. I'm always available. I'll find you a time. I had 2 final defenses today and one more tomorrow. We're turning them out. You want to be like them and get in line and finish on time. Well, this is a critical semester to get you a good outline before your research semester. All right, John, I've preached enough. I'm turning it over to you.
Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. I hope everyone is doing well. So I am beginning with reframing organizations, Bowman and Deal chapters 1 through 3. All right. So one thing, beginning with chapter 1, one thing that you will understand throughout the reading is that organizations are complex. And so when we are looking at complex organization, Um, it helps to think about the framing and the reframing and how can we make sense of those complex organizations. And so moving to, I think I skipped. Looking at the complexity of the organizations and the power of reframing and the manager's role in these situations. Um, in many situations, managers can um, be clueless, as the example at the beginning of the chapter shared, breakdown in communication, miscommunication, steps that are not followed in the process. The chapter opens with um, the election and what happened on January 6th. And so, looking at the cluelessness of those who were the leaders, those who were in charge in that situation, and using multiple lenses to get multiple perspectives of what you're up against. And so, reframing requires the ability to think about a situation from more than one perspective, more than one lens, more than one angle. And so, four lenses for sizing things up, for understanding complexity in organizations. We'll look at structural, human resource, political, and symbolic. When we look at those things, we also understand that failure to make sense of those complex situations can lead to catastrophe. When we are looking within this section, our authors lift up the virtues and the drawbacks of organized activities. And so we know that organizations can frustrate, they can exploit people. And if a leader misreads that situation, once again, um, it will do, that leader will do the wrong thing or make the wrong decision. One of the suggestions is upgrading management talent. And the authors talk about what happens when management and consultants fail, because when uh, organization management does not work, they lean on consultants. And so when those two things work, organization lean on policies and rules and the government to right the wrongs that have been made. And a lot of times there's a gap in understanding. There's a gap in the understanding of those legislators to really dig deeper and know how to solve or fix the issue that is happening. And so when we talk about framing, Goran Karstedt um, talks about a mental model, how we make sense of complex things. And so we can use things like labels, maps, mindset, schemas, paradigms, and cognitive lenses. And he talks about the two types of thinking. And the one that we'll lean on tonight, or the one that I'll discuss tonight, is unconscious or intuitive thinking, which is unconscious, very fast, holistic, and it is results effective judgment. So when we talk about the intuitive thinking, we are looking at sizing up that organization and being able to come to decisions about what's going on and using multiple perspectives, multiple structures, or multiple frames to understand what is happening there. Um, let's see. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. And so, how can leaders and managers improve odds for self-organization? So once again, going through the framing and the blink process, which goes into the blink process being unconscious, holistic, very fast, and matching situational cues that are well learned in the mental framework. And when we reframing, according to Bergman, frames outline the questions we ask and the solutions that we consider. And so when we look at a number, 5 + 5 is going to always give us 10, but reframing that structure, what are two numbers that we can get to make 10? It just opens up another paradigm, another perspective in that framing. And framing different concepts quickly. Um, a good leader reframes different concepts quickly, synthesizes data in a way that drives new insight, and building teams that can generate future uh, scenarios. And then going deeper in those structures, going deeper into where we talked about our 4 lenses. We looked at factories, um, which would be the rational world, organizational architecture, the planning, the strategy, the technology, and specialized roles. We looked at the human resource part, which would be we are a family, focus on the people and relationships, um, and human resource perspective is rooted in the psychology of organizations and its extended family. Jungles, this is the political frame, and organizations are viewed as arenas and concepts of conflict arises because of the variety of needs that have to be met and the perspectives and the different lifestyles involved. And so you'll see bargaining, you'll see negotiations and compromises that exist daily. For temples and carnivals, these are the symbolic lenses. Organizations as culture is propelled by the rituals and the ceremonies that arise, the heroes, the histories, and the myths. And that is where I will end with chapter 1. And so, any discussions, any questions about chapter 1?
I did want to add on consultants. Um, one of the biggest reasons is through the political lens that we hire consultants is when they leave, the bad feeling leaves with them, but the change remains. It's a political lens. You don't want to be blamed. You don't want to take the the backlash for things that need to be done. And so that's why we hire consultants. It's not that they're smarter than us. They leave and go home. And the change that they brought about that we already knew we needed, when they leave, the anger leaves with them, but the change stays. So that's I think more than anything, any other reason, we use consultants for that political reason. It's not that they're smarter than us or no, we work there every day. We know better than them. We just don't want to take the heat for the decisions. Um, I think if you think through your career, none of you are new. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've seen they're called things like the Renaissance, or they always have a name. Sometimes it's an acronym, but it's never going to be popular. It may need to be done. And so that's when we bring in the consultants. Good job, John. Moving on.
All right. So moving on to chapter 2. And you all please forgive me. I just finished working out, so I'm trying to make it through this. Oh my goodness. Simple ideas, complex organization. So we build on the complexity of organizations. And in this chapter, we learn that not only are organizations complex, deceptive, and they are ambiguous. And um, we go into the common fallacies of organizations. And so we have witnessed the blame game. Why did this fail? And this fallacy, it's too easy um, to explain why something goes wrong. We also, in this realm, ignore how the larger system, the hmm, ignoring the larger system failures. Another fallacy here in the blame game is the bureaucracy of it all. Um, the rules and the red tape involved, caused a failure. And the last thing is there's a thirst for power. And so we see organizations as the jungle, going back to the competitiveness and the always needing power. And so going back to the concept of organizations are complex. They're complex because people bring a lot with them. Um, it's a part of the unpredictableness of human beings, and organizations are surprising. And so, once again, it's not going to be always what we anticipate or what we expect. So, we get surprises lumped those into our different organizations. And so, organizations being deceptive, mistakes are present, and those surprises exist. And so, organizations being ambiguous, you have once again the different myths, the different mysteries that are involved in those organizations. And so, having the social structure, um, it goes beyond the individual to explain the social architecture of work. And we get into um, if the structure is is messed up, then you have, energy and resources that are spent in the wrong place. All right. And so that is chapter 2. And Dr. Lim, you have anything you want to add
Uh,
there?
expending that energy and resources. You've all heard me say it a dozen times. The folks in the central office are like warlords fighting for their little kingdom. They fight among themselves all the time. And a lot of that is expending resources, time, and money and people needlessly. That doesn't assist the organization. They're doing that for, as John said, their personal power. That's one of the things that will shock you when you get to the central office. Brittany's already there. I won't ask her to tell any tales out of school, but that'll be the one thing that will shock you more than anything else is that the folks there don't care about anybody except themselves and they fight among themselves. And if you don't stop that, they will use up all of the resources of the organization fighting one another rather than their common enemy. You wonder why. And again, I like all schools, charters, privates, doesn't matter to me. We got good people in all of them. But you wonder why public schools have lost so much ground to their competitors because they fight among themselves all the time, and they don't see what the real market share enemy is. They're too busy fighting among themselves to notice what's going on outside, and that's exactly what John was just talking about. They expend all of that capital. That's the nature of the beast, though. It's hard to stop that, but you have to if you're going to be a successful school district. Very good, John.
Okay. All right. And so the last part of chapter 3, for me, I was able to get to pull out the most important things, which were beyond that structural framework. It goes beyond the individual. And as I said, it looks at that architectural framework. And so getting past the complexity of that organization and just looking at the heart of what does that organizational learning look like. And the two things that the authors highlight there are differentiation and integration. And so, how do we, or what does dividing that work look like in creating those specialized roles and functions? And so, you've got to use vertical and you got to use horizontal procedures to bring everything together. And there's no one best way to organize. So it just depends on the circumstances and the mission, vision, and the goals of the organization to understand the complexity of what you face as a leader. And that's my presentation.
Well, very good, John. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right. Moving on. Who's our next presenter this evening?
Well, Katina was trying to get on, but she has really bad connection. I did she get on, y'all? Because I know she had texted she was trying and she wasn't being successful.
No, and she's not in the waiting room. We'll move on, and if she doesn't get in, we'll hear from her another time. So we'll keep on moving. I know this time of year it's stormy here. I'm hoping that, knock wood, that I don't get knocked offline tonight myself.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll go next.
All righty.
Let me turn off my cell phone. It likes to ding when I'm in class. All right. You find my presentation. It's on here somewhere. Okay. Sorry about my life, y'all. You can see it all over the place. Let me see. Wait a minute. Mm, where's my life? Here we go. All right. So I had chapter 7 through 9, and basically it's to me it's outlining some of the conversations we've been having in class, but from an organizational standpoint. So, as we know in this chapter, we're talking about improving our human resources and management. As we know, like we've been saying, if you invest in your people and you take care of them, you'll get a better return in your investment. Um, and that's in any organization. I don't care if it's school, any business. If you don't take care of your people are not going to take care of you and they're not going to stay. So the restructuring and downsizing. That's basically how it outlines the relationship between the individual and the organization. You have to look at the organization and the benefits it is from the top to the bottom. A lot of times people forget that everybody in the organization is important to the bottom person on that bottom tier. And taking care of all of your people, you will see a return in their work effort. And there's a long-term success in investing in employees and responding to their needs. As we look at retention and we look at attrition, a lot of times when you do those exit surveys and those exit interviews, you're finding out that a lot of times they leave because they don't feel like they're being heard, that they were supported. And a lot of times, especially in education, from doing my EDP, I found that a lot of people that left the field, they left because of what was going on and not feeling like they mattered in the district. So you definitely want to get it right. You want to make sure that you're taking care of the approach by, like Dr. Lamb says, take care of your people, making sure you find a way to address their needs. And one way we can do that in education is making sure we give them the resources they need, the professional development, the support they need. And, I touch on that a little bit in my EDP. I talk about the fact that maybe 3 years isn't enough. Maybe a quarterly check-in might be necessary. And that was one of the recommendations I made up until year 5. So that they'll know that you care. Because when you drop them off after 3 years, that's when it gets thick and it gets real. So just doing those quarterly check-ins, not as much as you would with a BT 1 through 3, but maybe expanding it up to the year 5 of just saying, hey, I just want to make sure you're good. Is there anything we need? That would go a long way, especially on the principal school level. So organizations also benefit from talented, motivated, loyal, and free-spirited workforce. You want your you want your people to bring their talents to the table. You don't want them to be stifled and be mini you. You want them to bring their original thoughts and things that can be something that can be beneficial to the organization. And that's what we look for in our human capital. If you're looking for little miniature leaders, the same person at the top in every person, your business will not be successful. You need everybody to bring their talents and you need them to be able to lead up from whatever position they're in. You want to build them up to feel like they matter. So you want to get it right. Systematic and interrelated human resource management. Practices that create a competitive advantage. You want to make sure you go at this the right way. You don't want to go in where it's not a collaborative, but you want them to continue to make sure that they are just as good as their counterpart. Everybody just being complacent doesn't work, but I want to be just as good as John. I want to be good, just as good as Brittany, because that's what's going to hold us up. And then me feeling like I can be also vulnerable enough to say, I don't quite have that, but I know I need to work up to that level. And I think that's something that we have to have conversations about, not put us against each other, but to be good as our counterparts. The philosophy is explicit organization core beliefs for managing people transitions into specific management practices. Those practices are so important to making sure that they are through and they're universal. A lot of times you may find a great manager, but the other one down the hall just sucks. And that one down the hall that sucks, they're going to be the cost of you losing your quality people that will do the work. So it is important that those practices are seen throughout that organization and not just stop at one individual. So as we say, being unified and making sure our practices are seen throughout our school districts. We don't want to have crappy principals because that school is not going to turn out any great returns. So as a district, we have to look at what do we want our district to speak for us. So in those strategic plans, we can't just talk about it. We got to make sure we're seeing that in our schools. So when we look at this is the specific basic resource strategies. You want to make sure that those strategies are specific. As I got this from our great text, I think this text is great because it's user friendly. It's not really wordy. It's easy to comprehend and it's easy to apply. So, I'm not going to insult anybody and read word for word, but we definitely want to make sure that we build those strategies in our human resource department. I'll use us as an example. We are restructuring. So that's looking very colorful for our district because as we have to realign, we have to look at the strategies that we're using. And one of the things that we're trying to do district-wide is transparency. Being truthful, being honest, and definitely putting everything out there on the front line so that the staff knows what kind of condition we're in and they know how to prepare themselves. It's better to receive if you knew you could prepare for it. And hiring the right people. All of us are in the process of hiring our staffs for our school. I had tons of interviews today and making sure those people are fit for the mission and the vision of the school. We all have people that we want to hire to have a body, but that body may not be impactful in that classroom. That body just might need a job and can't teach a lick. So it's definitely important that we make those decisions that is this a fit for my school or is this a fit for my organization, period. And you want to make sure the ones that are good, you want to make sure you reward them. You want to make sure you take care of them. And, like my principal and I, we had a conversation today. Yes, it's a position, but there's a person in that position. So it's important that we treat them as a person. Yes, they hold a position, but it's important we give that person what they need to be successful. So, as HR keep telling us, look at the position, we have to look at the person in the position as well because they all need different things from us to be successful. And we want to make sure we invest in them. We want to make sure we give them the tools to be successful as we are kicking off teacher clarity in our district. We don't want teachers to feel overwhelmed and stressed. So we're going to provide the resources they need to implement this in the classroom and also give them opportunities to practice without judgment and also have conversations on the rollout of what that looks like in our classrooms. So we do that by empowering them. When you bring people to the table and you want to know their opinion, that makes them feel like they matter. And a lot of times they're not being talked at, but their voice is being heard. They're able to give some insight and they're able to be objective without fear of punishment, which a lot of times we've all worked in a school that we've been afraid to say anything for fear of some type of reprimand later on. And we want to make sure we promote diversity. As we all know, that is becoming the elephant in the room. You can't even have it on paperwork anymore. You know, our state has really done a doozy with that. And as y'all probably know, working on the EDP and the teacher working conditions, how the language has changed from previous years to this time. And I saw that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it used to say equity. Now it says non-discrimination. So it's really interesting to me of how we're going about and how we're transitioning in our organization of education. So that was chapter 7. Do anybody want to add anything or feel like I left anything off?
You didn't
Tim?
leave anything off, but I want to. Did anybody watch either of the final defenses today? All right, so one of my organizational ladies did her final defense today, and she works for a large, well, I guess I can say it. She works for Coca-Cola Bottling in Charlotte, and she did a Hertzberg dissertation on employee retention in Coca-Cola at the Coca-Cola Bottling Company. And back to what Sine was just saying, finding the right people. What she kind of identified in her dissertation, I think, was the most important thing that she found was you had a group of people who their job was just to hire people um, and fill quotas, and they didn't seem to care that they didn't stay very long. It was almost like they intentionally didn't tell them what the job entailed. Now, this is merchandisers. Does anybody know what a merchandiser is in the soft drink business? I didn't until I did this dissertation. They call them, I just thought they were the fellows that drove the truck and then, got the hand trucks out and rolled all the cases of drinks into the convenience store. They call them merchandisers, by the way.
Hmm.
And they have a real problem with turnover of those people in the first 90 days. And one of her suggestions was they should put them on a truck and let them ride an experienced person for a time or two. And the feedback from the company, well, they won't take the job if we do that. But think about it. Again, back to what I was talking about earlier. They don't care that the people that actually have to deal with them, that they lose them and it costs all this money to replace them. They've wasted all this time. Their job is just to fill a quota. So they don't care if they get good people or not. And so they intentionally don't tell them what the job is, how hard it's going to be, the hours, the quotas. They don't tell them any of that stuff. It's like a secret when they hire them. They're just interested in getting them signed on the dotted line. And they say, oh, I did my job. Well, no, you didn't if they leave in the first 90 days. I see that in the school business as well. We just, we got so many people to hire. We're just going to hire them right quick. And HR just sends you just anybody
Hmm.
because all they're interested in is having to report how many vacancies they have to the board. And so, but you can't, if you're the person that's going to have to supervise them, it can't just be, I've got a spot, I've got a field, I've got to look at that person. And you've got to be honest about the job responsibilities. I had a secretary tell me one time when I was principal, said, I've never seen anybody that tried their best to get people not to take a job. I said, I just want them to know what they're getting themselves into. I don't want to have to replace them in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. No, what was it? Tom Hanks said, no crying in baseball. There's no crying in the school business. I want you to know what you're getting into. Is this a good fit? But if all of the different groups in the central office and school business aren't working together, You get one group, all they want's bodies, and then you're expected to do something with those bodies. And when they find out the reality of what the job is, either they in both of these, I don't know which is worse. They leave or they stay and are just terrible. That's our problem in a nutshell right there. They either leave or they stay and are bad because we don't get the right people from the very beginning. Please continue.
All right. So we're going to build back on the importance of interpersonal relationships and group dynamics. As we know, all of our organizations, I don't care if it's the Coca-Cola business, education, retail, interpersonal relationships are the foundation of that. And healthy interactions, that's what keeps a positive working environment. That's what keeps positive engagement. And you can get more done with the right interpersonal skills than you could by being dismissive of others. So, as we know in any business, you got to be able to communicate. It takes teamwork. I know we all are leaders and Lord, we know ain't nobody going to do it like us, but it's important that we delegate and we share that responsibility to prevent burnout. And I know as a new teacher, I was like, oh, I can do everything. I can do everything. Before it was all done, I had messed up my stomach. I had stress and everything until I realized I don't have to do everything. I can lean on my teammates to help me with some of the things. And most importantly, trust. You need to trust the organization that you work for because that's what keeps you coming. Right now, a lot of us, our trust in public education is sort of shaken due to what we've seen, but it's important that we keep that some faith that we know what we're doing and we trust the work that we're doing in the organization that we're working for. Conflict management. As leaders, that's what we do every day, all day, and not just with the people that we hire, but also with parents, all stakeholders actually, because sometimes when district folk come in and they don't understand why your school is operating it is, you're finding yourself managing that conflict of explaining the why we are doing this, because it may not be what you're doing, but it works in our school family. Collaboration. It is important that you have the voice of every stakeholder if you're trying to achieve a goal in your school or in your organization or in your business. And you want to make sure you bring them to the table, like we talked about in chapter 7. All the decisions can't be from one mind. We need to bring everybody's voice to the table in order to make an impact. So, some questions that we might want to ask when we're having those tough conversations is, what is really happening in this relationship? If you and a teacher just cannot, ooh, we just cannot get it together, we have to ask that question. What's happening in this relationship? Have we met to the middle of the road where we might need to separate and it might be next school year? Maybe they should be jumping on that transfer list. Maybe when you're having that conversation after the evaluation, that you're making sure that we're being honest about what we need from them to grow our students. It's never personal, it's about the students or it's about our product, whatever we're trying to do in that organization. That's where that trust comes in. And like you said, being honest of what we need. And seeing what the motives are behind that individual's behavior. A lot of times I've had a teacher, I'm just like, what is your deal? You come in nasty, you stay nasty all day, and try to get an understanding. Is it the work environment? Is it something personal? But we have to definitely uncover that because we know that's not good for the interpersonal relationship in the organization. And the most important part is it something we can problem solve? Can we do anything about it? And sometimes you can't. And that's okay too. I think that's one of the things that I think we're all learning as leaders. It's okay to tell some individuals we might have reached our role. I've had a teacher, she told me every week, I'm leaving. Before I knew it, I said, well, maybe that might be in your best interest because every week you're threatening to leave. And that's not how you engage. That's not how you problem solve. And when I said that, everything changed because I was no longer trying to pacify her. I told her, you have to do what's best for you. So, having that tough conversation. And it's important in our teams that we define our roles. A lot of times, without defined roles, you have no direction. And it's important that we as a team or as an organization, we define who those roles are so people can know who they need to sort of report to. That is important, especially if you all have different things that you go. If I'm over buses, hey, my role is the leader of that. If I'm over behavior, if I'm over instruction, or if it's a like something that needs to be written out, having that defined so that people can go to that and they can follow it. That map is so important. And clear goals. Where are we going? What's our direction? What are we doing? Don't just be all over the place. Have that defined. And that's going to develop that mutual trust and have that open communication. Um, it is important to be open to other people's thoughts, whether you agree with it or not. And, to not have disclosure of it's not right because it's not mine, being open to others and that shared accountability. If I fail, we all fail. So, and the same for the teachers. If they fail with their students, it's not just a reflection of that teacher, it's a reflection of that whole school. Or if we don't meet our sales in whatever the business is, it's not a reflection of that one individual, it is the company as a whole. And that psychological safety. Um, it is important that people take care of their mental. Um, and I've learned that as a leader myself. It's important that I stop and I eat. There were so many days I would just go, 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 and then I'd be like, "Ooh, why am I scatterbrained?" Because I didn't stop to take care of me. I put everything before. I didn't look at what I needed as a person. So just being open to the needs of your staff, the families, um, and like, I get it. It's hard to do because we have our focus, but we also got to remember everybody needs something different to sustain their mental. And so there's a four frame model that was in our text as well. Everybody has a role, and we sometimes interchange those roles. You might be the leader, but you're also wanting everybody to be a contributor. Everybody needs to be a collaborator. You got to be a communicator. And then you have to sometimes challenge. And it's okay to challenge. You don't want a yes person on your team. You need someone that's going to challenge your ideas so that we know that we're doing the right thing for the finished product. It might sound good to me, but when you iron it out, you might be like, oh, yeah, we might need to rethink that. And identifying the leadership role in all groups, the establishment of norms. Um, we started doing that years ago in our PLCs, in our ILTs, and it held everybody accountable. And it did put a level of confidentiality and trust and on our sit team discussing those norms before we even got down to business and not rushing through them, reminding them at the beginning of the meeting, let's go over our norms, because that allowed us to actively listen to the other party opposed to not or dismissing. So I think that is very important in any organization, is developing those norms that represent your organization and what you want to accomplish. So, we can move on to chapter 9 if anybody don't have any questions, or we can discuss further in chapter 8.
Nope, we'll move on.
Okay. So this is the fun chapter for me because we all have that balance of power, conflict, and coalition. Organizations are a coalition that's made up of a group of individuals, as we read, that have different interests, values, goals, and priorities. And what we need to do as organizations, put all those wonderful things together to have a common goal, a common mission. It is so important. We're not a great coalition if we're not pulling that together to work towards something. Conflict if it's inevitable. I've never had a year where it was selling. I've never not had conflict with a parent, no doing of my own, but as people can only see sometimes from their lens, conflict is definitely going to rise, and how we approach that conflict is so important because that one moment of wrong conflict can tear up everything that we've worked hard for. So it's so important that we make sure we manage that. And that's become one of the questions that we've put in our interview questions a lot here lately, is give us an example of how you would manage. And we gave them specific scenarios after certain things have happened, and just seeing what this person's first initial reaction is, or that give you an idea of what kind of team player you have on your team, and you can see their strengths and sometimes see some areas that we might need to improve. And manage the conflict and coalition constructively. The one thing that I think sometimes that happens is we're all human, and we often go to what we would do if we get upset and we're dealing with people, but it is important to know what role we're in. In a business, you can't respond the way you would. If you catch Sine or you get my nickname Nene, I can't respond the way I would as Assistant Principal Williams, so we have to definitely make sure we balance that out. Empowers essential in leadership with the ability to influence the decision and outcomes of the organization. And one thing that I've learned is power doesn't sit in the leader. A lot of people lead up from classrooms, they lead up across levels, and they do have a form of power because once you establish that leadership, you own that power in that area. And I think it's important to notice that power can be balanced throughout. It's just important that we make sure we're doing it in a healthy way, that we're not challenging each other with our abilities and our talents that we bring. So the power and the sources, formal authority or position with the organization. A lot of times I am the superintendent, so I have the power. That's great. But as we all know, in individual schools, they run differently. So power is distributed throughout the district. So it is important that we understand that our authority goes so far in this institution and we must align it, and we identify what that looks like to have healthy engagement throughout your business. It's just important. Specialized knowledge or expertise in the field. We're all specialists and we're becoming experts thanks to our program in our field of study. And it's important that we acknowledge those who do have those specializations. I know certain areas is not my cup of tea, and it's okay to definitely lean on those people where it is their specialty. It doesn't make you look weak or anything like that. It just look that you're using your coalition for what it's meant there for. Everybody has a purpose. And those networks and relationships, and your control of resources, credibility and reputation. That is so important, because we've made some shifts in our district, and some people got in positions where I don't feel like they're credible because if you got moved for inappropriate practices at this school, why are you going to another school to take those same things and you made the news? So your credibility is shot and your reputation is shot. But sometimes because of who you know in the network and the relationship, you're given a second chance. And we have to start looking like that. If that relationship is going to hinder students, are we doing the best thing for all stakeholders? That's just, some of the things that we get to see. And we want to make sure we build alliances and coalitions. It is so important that we build that camaraderie in our school, our organization, because you can tell when there's a break in the chain because everything just falters. It never rises up. You have a hard time with the simplest goals because there's a division there. So we want to make sure that we don't do anything that is like cliquish, but we want to build healthy alliance where we're working towards our goals and keeping ourselves in mind with what the finished product is. So as we know, politics, oh gosh, politics is everywhere, unfortunately. And we have to make sure that we use those decisions in a political way appropriately. You want to go so far with your bargaining. You don't want to stay where you get to a point where you're doing things that are questioning your integrity and it's taken away from what you're trying to accomplish. So there's a fine line between doing that, but we do that. We do. Negotiation. We have to negotiate for what we're trying to accomplish. We negotiate. And sometimes as leader, we negotiate. We may want to suspend somebody because she just can't get to work. She's just horrible. She need a couple days at home. But we're going to negotiate with that a little bit because she's got to drop her 5 kids off. We don't have anybody to fill the class. So we negotiate. Well, can you do this? And let's work on this. You can maybe come to work late, but you got to stay later. So we find ourselves negotiating with what we wouldn't allow everybody to do. So we do what we have to do for sustainability and to save our business and to survive. Persuasion. That's definitely a political piece. A lot of times we're trying to persuade our teachers to have an open mind. We're trying to persuade them to do what's right. We're trying to persuade them just to do your job. That's all we're asking you to do. And in business, I know, also working in retail, I'm always trying to persuade people or customers to do things. Oh, this will be great for you, knowing they may not have the money. They told me they got $25 and they don't want to go over $25, but I'm still trying to persuade them to spend 50 because it's going to help me reach my sales. I usually can get it done too, but I often don't feel good because I persuaded you to do something that you did not feel good about. But I knew what I was trying to accomplish to make sure me and my counterparts have hours or we can stay at work. So, a lot of times we do the persuasion piece because it works and benefits for us in real life. And we do it in education too, and in all businesses. So you want to make sure that you're strong as a leader to build your coalition. You want to make sure, like we talked about in our first class, you identifying who your comrades are, who your, I can't remember the other name, but the comrade is always the one.
Colleagues, comrades, and confidants.
Yes. And those are a part of your coalition, but they play a role. And they all bring something. Now, some of them, like they said, some of them gonna go to war with you, and that's it. Yeah, y'all may not see eye to eye, but they're gonna do what is in the best interest because you have a common goal. We are not friends, but we got a common goal. So when you think about that, you want to make sure you build a coalition that is working towards the organization's final product, whether it's retail, whether it's church, whatever it is, you want to make sure your coalition is strong and you know that they matter. So we want to drive the change. We want to make sure that we identify our stakeholders, their interest, and that it aligns to support the organizational goals. So, I can't stress that enough. We want to make sure that our people feel like they matter and that they contribute to our organization. And then we want to know that what we do influence everything. People, like if we come to work late, they're going to want to know why I got to come to work on time. If I'm in my office and I'm not in classrooms, I'm not walking halls, I'm not holding students accountable for behavior, why do they have to? So we set the bar for what we expect in our organizations, in our buildings. Like I can't respect the superintendent I never see in any schools. If I only see you at the school board meetings, that's a problem. So leaders in the organization, they build a relationship, they build the talent, and they empower others. And you have to create an environment where your workers feel like they can grow. I find that a lot of teachers who feel like they don't get an opportunity to come out the classroom or there's not an opportunity for them to be elevated, like a lot of them, they're going back to school. There's a lot of teachers that want their admin license. There's a lot of teachers that want to maybe go do speech and language, but provide them those opportunities to grow because as we know in education, it becomes a cap. If you want to definitely elevate, you're doing what we're doing. We know with what the education we had, it only would take us so far. So in order to get to the next level, we all enrolled in school, did what we need to do, but the support of our environments is what's helping push us through. So we have to look at it from that lens as well. And so when we want to think about applying it, collaborative leadership and staff engagement is essential for student success, learning, improvement of teaching, and staff engagement. We can never ever deviate from that because everything is about our students. And doing what's in the best interest of students is also taking care of our staff and making sure they have what they need to be successful. So in conclusion, chapter 7, when individuals are satisfied and find a meaning in their work, it benefits the organization. It just does. Chapter 8, employees bring social and interpersonal baggage when hired for a job. We know that. But as leaders, we have to help them balance that so that we can stay focused on working together to do our finished product, and which what we are all doing is making sure we educate our students. We've gotten to a point where we're good, but we have to make sure our students can be successful in life. So that is our focus, making sure our student product is successful. And then chapter 9, our organizations are political spaces where conflict, power, and the building of coalition shape decisions. So leaders embrace reality and use influence and negotiate to achieve organizational objectives. And that's me.
Very good.
Let me stop. Okay.
All right, who's our next presenter? And while we're getting ready, one of the more common things that I see and have seen my entire career, especially when I was an elementary principal, I've told you this story before, when we went to accountability and we got away from homogeneous grouping and went to heterogeneous grouping, and parents wanting certain teachers. Um, One of the things that I've seen throughout my career, rather than asking everybody to get as good as the popular teacher, we tend to want to throttle back the better ones, because we get so many complaints from the other teachers who aren't as good and from the parents who didn't get that teacher. We tend to punish our stars in our business because it keeps more, we think it will cause more harmony in our house to do that. That's been one of our downfalls where we've harmed ourselves over the years. That's been traditional, fighting among ourselves and not paying attention to the outside. That's another version of that. Rather than wanting all of your teachers to be as good as the popular one, throttle the popular one back, a lot more harmonious, don't get as many complaints. That's another example of that, fighting ourselves within the organization rather than our foes outside of the organization. Excellent. All right, Monique.
All right. So I had chapters 10 through 12. And I'm just going to go straight into it because chapter 10 followed what Sine was talking about as far as the manager serving as the politician. It goes into a little bit more depth. So when you are an effective leader, you understand that politics are everywhere. And I think as educators, we see that on a regular basis. We have to deal with politics not only within our buildings, but also with our stakeholders and central office personnel and things of that nature. So making sure that we understand that the politics are going to be everywhere. And they give us 4 key skills to focus on to serve as the politician, making sure that we set a clear agenda so that everyone understands where we're going, what we're working towards, mapping the terrain, understanding who has influence. So, understanding, like for me, for example, in a small district, there is only about 2 points of separation from any school board member, from parents to in the grocery store. So just understanding who you're surrounded with, teachers within our building who are cousins with the school board chair, knowing who has influence and mapping out and navigating that appropriately, networking and building those coalitions that Sine talked about, and making sure that we continue to build on those important relationships, and then also bargaining and negotiating for win-win outcomes. So making sure that when we are doing that bargaining that we talked about in chapter 9, that it's a win-win for everyone involved. That is how we serve as best with the politics within the building. And so this chapter in particular resonated with me because this is my goal for my PDP this year with micropolitics. So looking at political skill without ethics, the authors call manipulation. So making sure that even though we are navigating a political world everywhere around us, that we have to be guided by ethics. And I think that's super important because the business that we're in is children. And so we have to be super ethical in making sure that the things that we do are for their good and we're not causing harm in the politics that we play. You cannot believe in winning at all costs. So some things have to be sacrificed sometimes in order to ensure that we are operating at the highest ethics. There were 4 moral principles that they touched on. Mutuality, looking for solutions that provide benefits for everyone and not just ourselves. So we can't find a solution to the problem that only satisfies us. We have to consider our teachers, our students, and our parents, and our community sometimes. Generality, how do you want others to act in similar situations? So as we're responding or as we are deciding how we are to respond, making sure that we are okay with those around us responding in the same way. An example, like Sine said, we can't show up late to work and then expect our teachers to be on time and be present when students arrive. Openness, I thought that was pretty interesting because it reminded me of a saying that I like to use a lot, which is keep it hot, which means honest, open, and transparent. Making sure that everyone understands what our goal is. We're being open and honest about it. And if they come and ask us questions, we have no problem responding and telling them what we're talking about. Caring was the last one. And thinking about how it affects others. And again, this is super important because we're dealing with children and the decisions we make could cost them their future. So making sure that in that to the best of our ability as we're navigating the politics, that we're keeping and caring and thinking about those others before we make those decisions. Further connecting it to educational leadership. So just thinking about gaining teacher and school buy-in for a new initiative. I think this is super important as we're all navigating funding issues. The politics are becoming more and more important because we're going to be looking outside of the state and federal fundings to provide the needs that we have in our building. So those are the things that we need to navigate in that area. Also, working with parents when they have different opinions, we need to come to a common goal. And sometimes we have to finagle the parent to come to our side. You might come into the building, you're not initially on my side. You don't, you're upset that I have to suspend your child. And we have to serve as politicians to kind of make them feel okay that we're on the same page and that we want the same thing for their child. Also collaborating with district leaders, advocating for staffing and other resource needs. So again, we're going to have to depend more and more on our stakeholders to get the things that we need for our building. So being able to navigate that. The greater the influence, the greater the gains was something that I took away from that. So that was chapter 10. Did you want to add anything, Dr. Lamb? Or
Well,
anyone have any questions?
no, I think I'm gonna wait to the next one. Go right ahead.
Okay. So then chapter 11 was the final chapter in the political area. And it's talking about basically that our organizations are serving as the arena for the politics. And we have to be okay with understanding that conflict is going to be expected. No matter what we do to try to make everyone happy, somewhere along the line, there's going to be conflict. It is going to be normal. And the effective educator or the effective leader in the building, specifically the manager in the chapter, will be able to navigate those conflicts in a way that it does not destroy the organization. So being able to listen, building a consensus, it made sure to say that a consensus isn't necessarily our adversary gets their way or we get our way. Sometimes we have to meet in the middle, balancing competing interests, and then making sure we keep the main thing the main thing. And so for us, again, the main thing is our children's outcomes, and where we see our school going. So as long as we navigate our conflict with students in mind at all times, then we'll be able to navigate the conflict without destroying our organization. And that's really all I had for 11.
All right. I want to kind of piggyback. I was talking, doing a session this week. The number one indicator of principal success is ego drive. That willingness to compete, that want to compete, to do well. That naturally causes conflict, but also it circles back to the previous chapter. There's two sides to that coin. Yes, you have people and they tend to get performance, but it causes conflict, number one, but also at what cost in terms of ethical behavior. That's when you get people setting and erasing answers on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Giving out the test as a study guide. You've got to be able to manage that competition, that desire to win with ethical behavior. And also, that ethical behavior will help you manage conflict as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a twofer. Um, And so the key on both of those is the ethical behavior piece to control the over competitiveness and the desire to cheat and do whatever it takes and the stirring up of the conflict. If you can take your ego out of that and listen to everybody and maybe compromise, but that ego drive, yes, that's a predictor of success, but it also is if without the ethical piece, it gets out of control very quickly.
Mhm.
Go right ahead.
All right. I'm just looking over my notes, making sure I hit everything I wanted to hit. Okay. So my last chapter was chapter 12. And so we're moving out of just talking about politics. And so chapter 12 focused on organizational culture, which I think is a huge buzzword in education. We're always talking about improving the culture, making sure our culture is family oriented, welcoming, all of those things. So I thought that was interesting that we moved into that after talking about politics. So it's culture is more than just a set of rules. Um, Comprehensive culture is shaped through traditions, rituals, celebrations, shared valued, and experiences, which I thought was very interesting because often we think about our school culture as something that we have to do or create or move towards. But in the chapter, it talked about how sometimes us going through an experience at our school, for example, and just discussing it and seeing that we value the same things as it pertains to a conflict with a parent, that creates a positive culture. Um, this also includes, the typical things that we talk about, which is our staff appreciation events, morning announcements, and things of that nature. But these experiences will communicate to everyone, not just those who are in our building every day, but those who are kind of viewing us from the outside, say through social media, help them understand what we value as an organization. The stronger the culture, the better the organization. So, having that strong culture within the building will allow everyone, the adults especially, to build a place of trust, commitment, pride, and be able to effectively collaborate. And it goes into talking about how when we have that conflict, a strong culture will help us navigate and get through that conflict without destroying the organization. Um, One thing that really touched on me was employees often remember how the organization made them feel more than the policies that the organization enforced. So, thinking about when Dr. Lamb told us, we're never going to be the reason why people stay. Um, but we can definitely be the reason why they want to leave. So, how do you make people feel about the decisions that you're making? And as you collaborate together and build that strong culture, so you're not the one that's sending them out the door, because they're going to think about when they sit down and decide, do I want to move on or do I want to stay? How did they make me feel? They're not going to think about, oh, well, we have to be here at 7 o'clock, et cetera, et cetera. And then just pulling it all together. So, looking at the political frame, again, it is required part of our leadership to tap into that political side, but making sure that when we tap into that political side, that we do it in an ethical way. Um, Even though there is going to be conflict, making sure that as leaders, we're able to manage that conflict. Um, and that part, how we manage it and how people feel when we manage that conflict is what is going to sit with them the most. And is going to be the most important part in our toolbox as managers. And that was it.
Oh, excellent job. Yay. I wish y'all had seen Valerie's doctoral dissertation defense today. I mean, she outlined, I mean, rewards and recognition, even at the Coca-Cola bottling plant. That was their number one thing: rewards and recognition, intrinsic motivation, a path to advancement. Organizations are the same, folks, whether it's schools or the Coca-Cola bottling company. If you'd sat there today, you'd said, well, that's she was talking about school. No, she's talking about organizations. And her findings were, they need onboarding, they need constant feedback, they need positive affirmation, they need training, they need people who are honest with them and who care about them. And again, it's not, the manager can't make them stay, but they can make them go. And that's what they said 1,000 times over, you know.
Toward Whitney Boulevard.
And
Take your first left onto Whitney Boulevard.
what in the world?
Exit the parking lot.
All right. So, if you trick people into taking the job to start with, if you were disingenuous, you didn't tell them and you knew, you'll never overcome that. They won't think about, again, as Monique said, they won't think about having to be at work early. They'll think about how you treated them. Again, you can't make them stay, but you can certainly make them go. If you don't take away anything else from organizations, you need to take away that part. You can drive people away. Now, some people want to drive people away, the bad ones, but see, the good ones leave with them. And here, think about this, and I'll leave you with this thought tonight. The least capable don't have a lot of options. The good ones do. And so if you treat people badly to try to get your bad ones to leave, the good ones will leave, but the bad ones will stay because they've got no other option. And you've just cut off your nose to spite your face. Always remember that. If you're trying to make people leave through your behavior, you'll lose the good ones, not the bad ones. All right. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group tonight?
Wait.
No, you're gonna do yours, right?
Yeah, I need to present.
Yes.
Okay. So, just an FYI, I'm in West Virginia where there's like very spotty service, and I'm in the one building that has service, so people keep coming in and out. So if you hear background noise, I'm very sorry. So I did a presentation that I just put in the chat that Sham is going to actually do the beginning part. I was the end part, but needed to present tonight. So the first 20 slides, which you're going to hear about next time, really focus on the bureaucratic model of human resources. And so this presentation really dives into human resources and human relations. And so I'm not really going to highlight a lot of what Sham will talk about, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up the bureaucratic model that it talks about in the first 20 slides in a sense. And I think this goes into like, who do you want to work for? Do you want to be very bureaucratic? And so I think it talks a lot about having this strict hierarchy within your buildings, like very specific division of labor, and just really impersonal rules that staff would have to follow. And so there's a lot of challenges that come with that model. And so the first being that it's just really rigid, right? It's not adaptable. It's not anything that is, adapting to individual people and individual things that people are going through. It also really places this overimportance on following the rules. And so that becomes more important than actually achieving goals. Like we've been talking about, we're in the business for kids. So actually producing student outcomes is not the goal. Following every rule and being an exemplar employee becomes the rule. So really that tension in the hierarchy comes in when there is this conflict between supervisors and employees. So Sham is going to talk a lot more about this model next time, but I just had the very tail end of that, of wrapping up the challenges for the bureaucratic model. So I really moved into the conversation around the human relations movement. And really this movement was this idea that productivity and the ability to get people to do what we want them to do is more influenced by social or psychological factors over rules and the physical conditions or the pay that we all get. Like we all know that we're not in this for the pay because we don't make enough money. And so there's something else that brings us to the table, right? There's another draw that makes us want to do this work. And that's what this movement really focuses on. So there were some key elements of this movement that I wanted to highlight. The first being the Hawthorne effect. The worker that this is the idea that workers improve when they feel like they're being observed or cared about. So making sure that when we're doing observations, like even if someone only has a 20-minute observation, maybe staying in there for a full lesson so that they feel that value and you're able to see more with that. When people feel cared for, their productivity and their impact goes up. So the informal organization too is that instead of this formal hierarchy, like I'm the boss, you're the person under me, it's where it's more of a social construct. So groups are formed, and they kind of dictate the expectations and the behavior. I kind of thought about this I don't know if this is correct, but thinking about it through like as a PLC, and just thinking about like they create their own norms and they really impact and influence each other. When one of them's not pulling their weight, our hope is that they would call each other out on that. And so I think that's another key area of human development. And then the last big area was that a democratic administration. So this idea that when people have say and voice, that it increases morale and effectiveness. And I think we would all agree with that. When we feel like we're heard, we do better. So then it really dove into the theories and the behavioral science and organization behind all of this. And so the last few slides in the presentation that I linked in the chat is really talks about the social system theory. And so the idea that organizations have to be this I want to say the word they have to work with people's personal needs and what the organization needs. So that has to all come together and work out.
That's called the Get-Sales-Gooba model of social systems
Say that
from
one.
1957. That's one of your major theorists. I think we've talked about the Get-Sales-Gooba model. What the organization needs and wants has to be what the employee needs and want. If not, it doesn't work.
Right.
That model was published in 1957, GETZELS, Get Cells and Guba, GUBA. Explains that phenomenon that Brittany just so brilliantly pointed out. That's the heart of personnel right there. What we need and want for you to do as an organization has to be what you need and want and are capable of doing. If not, we got problems. And all of our professional development and our hiring has to be around that. We got to hire the right people, but we got to get them the right skill sets.
Yeah. So I think
Later on, around 2000, the hot book was Collins is Good to Great, and he used the bus metaphor. You had to get the right people and the right people on the bus and get them in the right seat. That's the Get Sales Gooba model, but that's a more modern interpretation of it. That's what Brittany's talking about.
I personally have done several presentations on are you on my bus? Like, are
Right.
you following what I'm doing in my building? And I think that is how you get people to follow you is you name and you share your expectations and then you get people to buy into that. Really the next few slides really dove into this idea, and I don't know if I'm going to say it right, but nomothetic and
Nomothetic.
nomothetic and idiographic, which is institutional requirements versus like individual personalities and needs. So that goes back to the theorists that Dr. Lane was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so really this idea of having an equilibrium, you have to have, in order for a school to be successful or any organization to be successful, there has to be a fit, right? There has to be a space where people are happy about what they're doing and they're doing their job. And so I think that's really one of the biggest takeaways from my section of the slides. The last thing that I'll say is I think the biggest idea from my whole section is just this idea of moving away from that hierarchical structure and moving into this idea of having, instead of supervisors seeing their employees as like a cog in the machine, like just one element of the process, to really making sure that they are a part of the whole system and that they're motivated and that they have relationships that drive that success. And so we've really shifted from rule followers to we want everyone to be a part of it And we know that they're an important and they're an integral part of that. And so we need to make sure that they're motivated and that they have strong relationships there to keep them employed in your organization. And that is it for my presentation.
All right. One of the things that I want to say is we've talked about who major theorists are. Again, for leadership, teacher leadership from the school-wide perspective, that's Todd Whitaker. That's teaching others, being involved in curriculum, finances, school improvement team, and hiring. But the other piece is Robert Marzano, leaders in your own classroom, building teacher capacity and teacher leadership in their own rooms, being able to be expert practitioners in their rooms. Now, as crazy as this sounds, there's a lot of folks in leadership who do not believe in teacher empowerment. Now, they don't go out and say it out loud, but you can tell. Here are the two keys. Number one, they have the same people in the same leadership positions all the time who don't have leadership or who metaphorically just roll the ball out. If you value teacher leadership and you want to build teacher leadership in your building, your best teachers have to be your teacher leaders in the positions around your school. Not your buddies, not your friends, not the PE teacher that everybody likes. You must have your strongest teachers being your teacher leaders. That's how you build a culture of teaching and learning. And the second piece, when you understand that folks aren't really interested in teacher leadership, is they never go to the classrooms. They don't care. Those are one or both of those. People can talk about teacher leadership all they want to, and everybody's all on board. And yeah, it's wonderful, it's great, got to have it. But either of those two things happen, they're talking out of the side of their mouth. They're not telling you the truth. Those are the things that have to happen. If you truly believe in teacher leadership, you have to have your best people, regardless of time or local folklore or their status in the community. You have to have your best teachers in positions of leadership throughout your building, and you have to be in the rooms, and you have to show that you value leadership within the classroom as well. Either of those. So that's the trick right there. That's the cheat code for if principals believe and district people believe in teacher leadership or not. They all say they do. Yeah, that's just like when I go home after I've been here by myself all week. I tell my wife every week I ate good. Boy, I didn't eat any dessert or pie. I did all the right things. But now, if you'd have watched me, it might have been a different story. You need to watch what people do, not what they say, because everybody's all in on teacher leadership until you observe their behavior. Don't be fooled. All right, Sham, you have something you want to share with us tonight, or are you going to go next time? Next time, good for you. All right. It's just 21 after or 20 after, so we got done a few minutes early. Good for us. All right, so when am I going to see y'all again? Let me share my screen right quick, and let's make sure that we know what page we're on here. Always important to know what page you're on. All right, let me go back here. All right, so tonight is July the 7th, Tuesday. I will see you next weekend, the 17th, the 7th, the 18th, and the 19th. Did we say that we were doing potluck and that I was going to do a Mexican theme? Is that what we're going to do? Y'all tell me what we're going to do for lunch on Saturday.
I think that
Potluck.
was the last thing we talked about. Yes.
Well, we're going to do, so reminding me again, we're going to do potluck. And I'm
It
going
was
to
going to be,
bring a chicken taco pie. And if y'all want to bring Mexican type or Hispanic foods, that'd be great. But I'll bring enough taco pie that we can have taco pie with chicken. That sound good? All right. I will see y'all Saturday week on the 18th in Charlotte. Everybody have a good week. Thank you. Good night.